Hey guys, and welcome to another Interstellar Modeler. This is now part 2 of my Force Awakens helmet build. So what I'm doing now is I am trimming the main part of the helmet, and you can see I have penciled along here the areas that I need to cut. So I found it easy to trim most of this with a pair of scissors and finish it up with my Dremel. So there are a couple different tools I used on my Dremel. The first one is this saw, which looks like this, and that cut away most of the plastic. And then the second is I'm just using this one, which is a very helpful tool. It's just a sanding tool. It has pretty coarse grit to it, and it pretty much eats away at the plastic fairly quickly, so you've got to be very careful as you're using it so that you don't trim away too much. So again, just taking scissors, cutting away at the main parts, and then finishing up and smoothing it over with the Dremel here. Now, Chris at Golden Armor has access to a bandsaw, and I don't, so I'm just showing you what you can do with just some tools that you might have around already for your model building. And it's working fairly well to smooth everything over just like he did. So, I'm going to go ahead and proceed with that. Let me just show you how this is working out here with some video. So, hang in there. Okay, and here's the cut completed now. And the nice thing about having a Dremel, though, is that you have a lot of control as you're going around these sharp corners and stuff. Just make sure that as you're doing this, you're not applying a ton of pressure, because this will eat away at the plastic fairly quickly. You just do, especially when you're done, you just do very light passes along the edge there so you can smooth it out. Now, the rest of it's going to be smoothed out with sandpaper, but you can get rid of all the excess pretty easily this way. Alright, so let's go ahead and start on the other side. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is just cut it out with some scissors here. I'm just going to cut close to the trim line here. And plastic is not too hard to cut. It just takes a little bit of effort to get through it. So I'll go ahead and start trimming along here and show you my progress here shortly. Okay, so I had to use the saw a bit more here, and the strategy is to get as close to this line here as possible. And but the saw does melt away the plastic, so you don't want to get right on the line there. Now we're going to use the grinding tool to get closer. Like what you see here. Alright, so let's go ahead and keep moving on. Okay, so I've taped the helmet temporarily together here just to kind of see how things are looking. And Chris suggested that we have about 3.5 inches from one tip to the other here, and that is about what we have for the average size head anyway. So far so good. Okay, so we're moving on to these sections now. These are the earpieces. So the first thing I did was to cut them out of the mold they came in, and I just use this cutting tool here on the Dremel. And then we have to cut the interior now, so since I don't have a bandsaw, I'm going to do it this way. I just cut a series of holes here, and we're just going to cut along here and trim the inside out. So let's just see how that works out. Okay, and here's the finished piece. I'm going to fine-tune it by sanding it furthermore by hand, but you can see it came out pretty well. This is the other side here. That's what it looks like when it's all cut out, and then I now will use, again, this tool here just to grind away at the excess plastic that you see there. So here we now have the finished earpieces. You can see they're looking pretty good. It was just a matter of taking the Dremel and shaping it. So I'm going to work on a little bit more here, but they're looking pretty good, I think. One reminder is, of course, as you're doing this sort of work, you want to use eye shields, because the plastic that gets spun off the Dremel can be fairly warm. You obviously do not want that going in your eye, or any plastic going in your eye for that matter, so just make sure you're protecting yourself. Alright, so we're moving along here now. Okay, so this is the next piece to cut, and you can see the lines have already been drawn. And actually, Chris at Golden Armor recommends cutting this out as well, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Once we do that, we're going to glue a piece of styrene underneath that just to give it a bit more dimension here. Okay, so I'm going to move forward with that now. Okay, so here's what the piece looks like, and by the way, this is what that piece was for, this glass shield plate that I showed in the preview video. This was included with the kit here. And it's nice because it's curved just like it's supposed to be. I actually had forgotten about this piece and attempted to put a piece of styrene there, and it was a bit difficult to curve it properly, so it was nice that he included this with the kit. So the next piece now to work on is this piece here. This goes over the entire helmet, and so I have to trim this out according to, at least along these guidelines here. Okay, so here we now have the finished piece, so this is all set to go. I'm going to go ahead and set this aside because now we have to glue the two halves together. So I lined them and taped them together, and now I'm going to go ahead and apply some super glue along here, along with an accelerator. Okay, so I'm now gluing on this crown piece here, so I'm just going to let it set. Even though I'm using super glue and it should set fairly quickly, I'm just going to go ahead and let it sit this way for a little while. And that way it cures properly. Alright, so I will show you the next step here shortly. Okay, so here we now have the helmet glued together, and Chris also advised that I cover the two notches that were here, so I did my best to do that. Some of this is going to be covered by the blast shield anyway, but I smoothed it over as best I could. I just applied some Tamiya's white putty and filled that in, and then just applied it several times and then sanded it over. Okay, so now we're ready to paint, so I'm going to go ahead and paint this black, and I'm going to follow his lead here when it comes to detailing it. Usually I'll use masking fluid and all sorts of other things, but he had a unique way of scratching up, making the helmet look all scratched up and stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and follow his lead on that. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and paint this, and I'll show you when it's done.